So, great discussion and or great set of presentations on there on the data, the policy considerations about school-wide, and the common themes of safety and how do we keep kids out of trouble. And so what I'd like to do is open it up first, I guess, to questions that people might have, and then once we have those done, that may take the rest of the time, but if not, then I have some topics for discussion that are within that framework. Questions? Yeah.
My question is, do you have ideas as to where the scope should be set? Or if not, then who do you think has the responsibility to narrow that in? Where do you think the solutions are? Or do you think that that we don't know yet and that it requires a lot more research and thought?
And is that?
I think you both can take it, yeah.
I could comment on that. There's an old saying that I learned a long time ago in my career is you can only police the people as much as they'll allow. And that's true for your community, and when you make the scope smaller in the law enforcement area in school, the school and the parents and the kids and that kind of thing are going to set that. One of the dangers that he's talking about is right after a shooting like Columbine, then they want to militarize the school where there's a guard on every corner and that kind of thing, and that's not what we're trying to do. You know, I got to tell you right now, the schools are a little bit safer, but if someone wanted to walk on the school ground in Springfield, they could still shoot it up. But having said that, we've gone beyond that. So I think a lot of that, it's hard to set a line, one size fits all across the country, in my opinion. I think that should be kind of a thing that is left up to the schools and the particular communities at some level.
Yeah, it's a great question. The Council of State Governments has some really good research on the issue. If you look across the nation, there's been a lot of legislation lately at the state level in terms of school discipline reform. Oregon just unanimously passed last year HB 2192, and that is a law that's specifically looking at zero tolerance. It's not a law that's trying to get police out of schools or not take weapons seriously. It's a law that's saying, let's address the other stuff that maybe there's some danger of overbreadth there. So for me, it's the issue of imminence and the actual threat to harm. And so for Sergeant Lewis, what he's saying as well is, we're there to make sure that there's not another Thurston, there's not another Columbine. I think part of that is a policy-driven one. I think it can happen from a state statutory level. I think district policy is critical, and if you look around the nation, Oakland and San Francisco and Denver, their school boards are adopting, restorative practices, and they're operationalizing what that looks like, and then they're training school resource officers, counselors, teachers in how our new paradigm is going to work. We're going to look first to restore and keep kids in school, and we're only going to suspend or expel or get law enforcement involved if that really comes to fruition. I should mention also I volunteer mediate for a local nonprofit, and I do restorative justice hearings for kids who have been arrested. And I think there's a lot of stuff still that in Lane County even, kids end up getting cited for, and they get kicked into the juvenile justice system. And a lot of this stuff is really, kind of first-time offenses, and I get these kids in with their parents and with the pastor or whoever, the church they vandalized or whatever. And we go through this restorative justice process, and you realize you really are missing an opportunity to teach kids if you go first to the criminalization piece. But for me, it's an issue of imminence and really defining that carefully. We probably haven't been as careful as we should have in the past.
Go ahead, Linda. Yep.
I can answer for Springfield that that's not happening. I think that if anything, it's like I said, the goal is to keep the kid in school, depending on the seriousness of the crime. If it's over the top, then obviously then there's a victim and that kind of thing. And one of the things about what we didn't talk about too is the bullying issue in school and the partnership between the police and the school on something like that. Because technically bullying could be construed as some type of harassment or even some sort of assault. And it's been a really good tool for us as far as, intervening in those kind of things. But to what you're asking, I don't see that happening in the Springfield school districts. And it goes back to people. It goes back to the quality of people we send to them and the quality of people that the school has involved intermingling with them. Lazy people, we'll do stuff like that. You handle it. Ship it all off to the police. Just arrest him and get him out of here. That can't happen. And it's not happening as far as I know. And if it did, we'd change our personnel up there.
Yeah, I agree with Sergeant Lewis 100%, and it sounds to me like Springfield, is a great example. It's nice to have a boots on the ground perspective of, what it can and does look like when done right. I think it really is about relationships, and there's a quote one of my favorite quotes, and it's from an anonymous school principal. It says, "Relationships are stronger than metal detectors." So all the metal detectors in the world are not, at some point, not necessarily going to really turn school climate around. What turns school climate around and makes students really feel safe is what he said. It's you're dealing with the bullying stuff. You're making sure that school resource officers can build relationships with students that are based on trust. Teachers have to learn how to build relationships with students based on trust. We have a racial mismatch. The teachers that we have in the classrooms don't necessarily reflect the demographics of the population, and so we can think about what that looks like in terms of recruiting, but we also have to think about just being culturally sensitive and cultural responsive teaching and how to do those kinds of processes in ways that build relationships.
So this sort of builds on Linda's question, but there's only one officer in high schools and they can't see everything. What sort of role do you think teachers and parents and counselors should play in helping alert police to these sort of things without passing off the buck too often?
Are you talking specifically about information as to criminal activity or that kind of thing?
Yeah.
Or I think that, and it does happen, honestly speaking, some of these kids who come to school have horrible home lives and horrible parents. So their parents are totally involved, or the parents are saying, period, don't talk to the police. So you got to get over that hurdle to begin with. But the school, counselors in the school have a legal obligation in certain circumstances to obviously tell the police or mandatory reporters on a lot of things. And the police officer needs to, on his end or her end, go out and develop those relationships. Because, I worked narcotics for a long time, and there's no different. You have to empathize with people, and you have to get along with people to get information from people. They have to trust you that you're going to deliver on your end, and that you're going to do what you say you're going to do. And it's just as important that the officer develop those relationships with the people that can help him do his job. And prevention is what he's really apt to, because if nothing happens, he's got nothing to do. And getting those channels open so people will actually communicate with him without any kind of fear or anything else that he's going to turn around on him or not do something is really important. Yes?
I'm curious as to how police officers are involved in the bullying issue. Like, what roles do in a school, like, I'm sure garbage men.
Well, there's so many different kinds of bullying. There's the picking on, that kind of thing, to the cyberbullying, to everything else. We're still behind the 8 ball as far as some of the technological advances people have as far as how to bully people, and the anonymous way that they can do it by that, So how they're involved in there is, if somebody's being bullied, a lot of times the person being bullied isn't the one who actually makes the complaint, it's their parents. The parents, they go home and tell their parents, and they're worried because the stigma of school, they don't want to get it any further, and they'll talk to us about it. And so at that point, we'll get involved as far as exactly what kind it is, and if it's and where it fits in the realm of the criminal system, as far as whether it's harassment, a computer crime, or anything else that goes along there. And then, along with the school rules, figure out what we're going to do about that. And that will be done with, if we know who's doing it, down to the office, he comes probably to the school first, and then to the resource officer, and then the parents get involved. The parents get involved, and sometimes the ultimate punishment, if you will, that gets handed out is a agreement between the parents, the school, and the police officer on what needs to happen here.
So between your two points of view, and regarding the school to prison pipeline concept, what do you two view as your common ground on that subject?
I think the common ground here is that here's an opportunity before these citizens or adults to change their behavior. And, you know, how we go about it, you know, police officers, I've thought a lot about this, and I've been to college, and I've done this, and we talk about we always talk about the root cause of crime and all these things. And then I took about it as my 30 years of experience, and I wonder, is that really true, or is this or that really true? But the good thing is we're always trying to get it right. And the police officers are usually, you know, all of the trying to get it right, sometimes people fall through the cracks, and they end up with us after school, for sure. And while they're in school, if we have an active role in trying to change their behavior, make them aware of the consequences of where they're headed, that's really sometimes all you can do. And I think that's our common ground. I think that, you know, we're really not interested in going out there and throwing everybody in the juvenile justice system, the SUBU. It just doesn't work, and we know that.
Yeah, I would agree. We have an opportunity to teach, you know, from the time kids come into kindergarten to the time they leave our public school systems. We know, based on neuroscience, that, you know, neurologically, the brain isn't really fully developed until early to mid-20s. So we've devised criminal justice frameworks to hopefully sort of accommodate and account for that. So it's about philosophy. It's about, you know, it's about having everyone on the same page, principals, teachers, school resource officers, and really engaging families and building that human and social capital so that we all say, yeah, we're here to keep kids here. We'll do everything we can. Kids need to hear that. They need, too many times, particularly kids from rough homes are hearing, you screw up, we don't want you. We don't want to deal with it. And that's that laziness he was talking about, that unfortunately that's become an easy out, is I got 30 kids in my room, I'm underfunded, I don't have time to stop and see how your morning went or whether you slept in your car last night, right? Just go down the hall to the principal. So it's just changing our philosophy. But I think we very much have a lot of common ground.
Yeah.
How much do you think the potential for civil liability is affecting the school's disciplinary functions? There's a lot more litigation nowadays about discipline examples. What's your feeling about whether that's a good thing or a bad thing?
That's a really interesting, deeper, you know, beyond the scope of this, but it's an interesting question. It's I would say that there is more litigation, there's more legal action. Southern Poverty Law Center, and there's groups in California that are really paying attention to the school to prison pipeline and thinking about legal strategies, ways to address that. And there's all kinds of really interesting issues and challenges around, you know, how you might go about bringing actions. My personal view is that litigation can be helpful to the extent that it's done in a way that can result in either a consent decree or a settlement that's really systemic in nature. And what I'm seeing a lot is attorneys partnering with psychologists and behavior specialists and educators to say, we've got this legal issue here and this disparate impact, or whatever, however you want to frame your legal arguments, but we're really interested in fixing it. And to fix it, we have to change hearts and minds, and we have to do positive behavior support, and we have to learn how to do restorative justice. There's a movement around restorative justice in this country that I think is really exciting. And if you look around, schools are adopting it, districts are adopting it, states are adopting it. So I think the litigation can be influential as a catalyst for change. I really do. I think that school administrators are wise to really look at their data. You know, if they've got disproportionality issues, if they've got referrals and suspension rates that are outside of the norm, they really have some policy changes to make.
Megan?
Nobody else has anything. So you kind of touched
Well, first, from my end, one of the things that happens initially is the school will contact the parents. The parents are made aware that the police officer is going to talk to their child about whatever it is the act is. And then it's right back to everything else. The Miranda rights are given, and the parents can obviously invoke those or whatever the case may be. And we usually don't talk to them unless the parents are notified and either said, go ahead, or I want to be there, or I don't want him talking to you, that kind of thing. Unless it's a case of where they're not necessarily a suspect, but they're a victim of abuse from the home, whether it's sexual or physical or anything like that, then we don't talk to the parents. Or in the very rare case of the kid is, working with one of the parents to do illegal stuff, such as dealing drugs or something like that, then that's a different situation, and that is so rare, so rare. The only time we don't have parents involved is under the abuse situations, and those people aren't suspects. So as far as the training, they have, they do go to the SRO training, which doesn't really cover, as far as I know, as far as interrogating people, but they would go back to their police training of that, and those things happen right at school. They happen within the office, that's right in the main area. They don't take them to the dungeon anywhere or anything like that. And I suppose the stigma the kids would see, it's good news or bad news rides a fast horse in schools, and if one person knows somebody got arrested or they did something, they're on their Twitter account and everybody knows it instantly. And so, that's something that we really can't avoid. I mean, we take them in there and try to get it done, and it's I guess that can be a good thing or a bad thing, depending on what kind of positive or negative outcome there was.
Yeah, it's a great question. As far as training, Sergeant Lewis's the description of Springfield is that, Springfield police going in as SROs. Around the nation, though, there are districts that hire and staff their own SROs, and that gets a little murkier, I think, because then you have school district employees, and so you're kind of trying to figure out, those lines of demarcation. So I think it's important, that the comment about, Fourth Amendment stuff applies the same way in the school as it does on the street for a sworn officer. But it goes back to relationships, and you were onto something real important, which is the tenor of the school climate, and I think it just goes back to that trust, that relationship building. Being fair and building relationships with students, and so that they kind of understand that school resource officers are there to keep people safe, and they have to do their jobs, and they're not going to overstep, and that they're going to follow procedures. And I think that due process piece is real critical. There are lots of situations across the nation, horror stories you hear about due process not being followed. I think due process, that's a real interesting area of how that shakes out across the nation in schools. But I would say as an administrator and as a police law enforcement person, that a lot of energy and time needs to be spent on that training piece to make sure that best practice is being followed.
I understand some people need to leave to get to class. I think we'll take one more question. We have time. Yeah, Mike.
How does it play out in private schools? Yeah.
We're not involved.
Yeah.
We're not involved in private schools. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, private, whole different animal. I mean, different, from your earlier question about litigation, different way of bringing a legal action versus whether they're a state actor or not. So I would say private schools are kind of their own. The more interesting one is charter schools, and we've seen a proliferation of charter schools in this country. And I can tell you, coming from a state where that was kind of a cottage industry, that all charter schools are not created equal. As an attorney, I got some crazy stuff happening in charter schools in terms of just students with disabilities and the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act and other kinds of ADA type violations and civil rights type violations. So again, we have to be really conscious if we're going to do charter schools. We have to make sure that they're public schools and that they're held to the same accountability standards as others. But yeah, private schools, a really interesting question. I really don't know the answer, what that looks like across the nation, but it'd be an interesting research paper.
Thank you. I'd like to thank our speakers again. Thank you, Sergeant Lewis and Professor English. We really appreciate it. Good job.